Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to give it a few minutes to get people a chance to come on in the room. If you could put your name and the org you're here for in the chat. Hi, Robin. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Robin.
Hi, Patricia or PJ for Caring Solutions.
Hey, PJ.
Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to give it a few more minutes. You can go ahead and drop your name and your org in the chat. In the meantime, hi, Claire. Thank you for joining us today. Okay. Oh. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our second to last, I believe it is, GiveSTL Day training. Today we have Rachel Morgan with the St. Louis Crisis Nursery talking to us about getting the board invited into your work before the campaign. I'm super excited about it. Rachel and I had a discussion about this about a month ago, and when she finished talking, I was like, oh my goodness, how do I take this and put it into a presentation and give it to our nonprofits? So she has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm super excited to have her share with us today. And Rachel, take it away.
Thank you, Regine. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. Especially if this is your lunch hour. Please continue enjoying your lunch. Pretend we are sitting across from each other and having a great conversation. I am working from home today, so I have little friends that may pipe up here and there. I apologize. Life continues because we had our water leaking through our ceiling in the middle of the night last night, so I had to stay home to welcome the repair people. At any rate, yes, my name is Rachel Morgan, and I'm currently with the St. Louis Crisis Nursery. Before that, I worked for the Arts and Education Council and Crossroads College Prep, among a number of other small nonprofits. And Regine and I were just chatting before the workshop started about different kinds of boards and our comfort levels with them. And it's so interesting to hear people's experiences. And I'd love to invite you all to be in conversation with me, whether you're comfortable speaking up or through the chat. I'd love to hear you throughout the workshop. And so think of this more as an opportunity for us to collaborate. I don't have all the answers. I think that we probably know more together than me independently. Um, I was just saying to Regine, when I worked at the Education Council, I had a really unique experience with our board then because I helped the organization work through a merger, and we were very, very small at that time. Of course, they're quite all-thing. Um, I helped them work through a merger. Um, um, work through a merger, and we were in weekly conversation about what that might look like, and how that would come through. And so it's very stressful. And there were lots of opinions, um, but but it was a way to get to know everybody, although not the ideal way. And so I'd like to talk about ways to engage the board so that whatever comes up, whether it be a campaign or a crisis or a shift in leadership, you have that authentic relationship already built. So it makes problem solving and working through all kinds of experiences more authentic, more relational, and comfortable for all. Um, so to that end, sorry about the dogs. I want to start just by talking through my own experiences. A few words come to mind for me. Um, Working with boards can sometimes for me feel nerve-wracking. It can feel performative, formal, evaluative. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one who has felt that way or you have similar feelings. So I'd love to hear whether you want to speak up or put it in the chat, some words that come to mind for you when you think about your board relationships. And Regine's gonna read them out for me. Thank you, Regine. Any thoughts? Regine, you want to share any?
We don't have someone said
Yeah.
that collaborative at times. Another
Okay,
one
good.
says another one says evaluative at times for sure, but also close for lack of a better word.
What was it, for lack of a better word?
But also close
Close. Okay.
for lack of a better word.
Okay. Anyone else? And there's not a right answer here. I'm not looking for any specific answer. I just sort of want to hear where each of you are coming from so we can shape our discussion. Um, One thing that has come across through reading and through conversations with colleagues is that there are some common challenges that we face. It can feel in engaging with our boards. It can feel like we need to impress or persuade them into our way of thinking, into our needs. Sometimes meaningful engagement only happens during campaigns or crisis, and otherwise, particularly if you have a board that's more in a governing position, it can feel more like one-offs or isolated, and that a lot of people engage with their boards through their board meetings, which can feel most like reporting over connecting. And so the question becomes, how do we mitigate that? How do we bridge that? So that when we come to a campaign like GiveSTL or any other kind of engagement, we've already got them meaningfully connected with us. So, of course, and this goes without saying across any relationship in our organization, we start with connection, right? Connection first. Start with people and the rest follows. Um, when we say it can feel evaluative, we feel like we're being tested. So, how do we mitigate that together? And I've identified sort of three traits to mitigate that, to establish that closer relationship. It starts with listening, then connecting, and then inviting. If we want to have those authentic relationships, let's start together now. I always feel like if I'm asking you all to do something with others, let's practice it here together. So if you'd be willing, once again, whether in the chat or to speak up, share what brought you to your work at your nonprofit and what part of your mission feels most meaningful to you right now. So I'll start. Um, like I said, I currently work for the crisis nursery. And what brought me to the work is I have a background first in my career as an educator. So I have a deep care for all kiddos. And that really spoke to me both as the work at the nursery really spoke to me as a parent and as an educator. And also, I could tell before I even had my first interview that they were really authentically living out their mission. And I am grateful to share that I still feel that way a year into my time there. And so the part of the mission that feels most meaningful to me is meeting families where they are in a strengths-based way, and working alongside families rather than having a power over approach and telling families what to do. So that's what brought me to my current role. And I'd love to hear from you all.
Do you want us to just chime in?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
Lauren. Thank you.
I'm Laura, and I am with the Community Gospel Choir of St. Louis.
I love
Um,
that.
and I was drawn to this group because I love music. I love gospel music, and you didn't have to audition. And so I could be in the choir without any audition. But I also really, it was the mission, because our mission is to bring unity to the community through gospel music. And so we have a very diverse choir, and we have our concerts are free for everyone, and we serve diverse communities. So yeah, I think that's all.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Laura.
Sure.
Anyone else? And Regine's going to let me know if there's anything in the chat. Okay, feel free to pipe in um, if you think of something. No pressure though. Um, so I think that these kind of conversations, when attached to a conversation with a board member, can lead to an understanding that you didn't have before, some insight to their why that is maybe hidden, or and even more than that, though, you're creating space for that board member to feel seen and heard and valued. And there are lots of ways to accomplish this. One is through like a one-on-one coffee or some kind of one-on-one lunch meeting or conversation. I have a colleague who has open office hours that she invites anyone in the community that we serve to come in and pop in and have a conversation or call her. Um, but I think that those one-on-one conversations really allow board members to express those motivations, just like Laura shared. If Laura were on our board, I might not know that she loves that aspect that you don't have to audition. And that can be something that she uses when she talks about the work that we do together at the nonprofit, um, that impresses other people and connects them to the work. And then there's asking why. Um, like we just did. Delving into people's stories helps to connect us, helps us to foster empathy and deeper relationships with our board. My current CEO does a really nice job of starting meetings with asking people their why, not just board meetings, but even internal staff meetings. And it is so lovely to hear people's whys because, and so often it's totally unexpected. And that's just kind of a nice and less atypical way of being in conversation with your board, is to start out by asking a question and getting everybody started. Because even if you have to go through a formal agenda after that, you've got people sort of warmed up and warmed to the idea of being in conversation together. You can also do that in those one-on-one copies or in any other context as well. And then doing some kind of a strengths assessment. That sounds formal. I don't mean it to be, but identifying strengths and interests that align people with roles that enhance engagement. So, for example, when I first started, we had a board member who attended every meeting, but they didn't speak up very often. And I saw that they had a background in some work that I was currently doing. And so I messaged them and asked them if they'd be willing to review the project with me. Well, through the course of several months of doing that, even though this wasn't connected necessarily to what their professional strengths would be, what were listed on a CV, they ended up participating with me on this project. And it led to them being more vocal in conversations at meetings. So you just never know. I think so often, people have, you have a lawyer on the board, you have a banker, and people bring you expect people to bring sort of their lens from their professional work, but people are, have so much more that they can bring to the conversation outside of just their professional lens. And these one-on-one conversations, this asking of why, gives you some insight into what that might be and other projects, other ways that you can engage them outside of their typical engagement thus far. The next would be to connect.
We had one more in the comments I want to read to you.
Okay.
Quickly. This is from Ashley Thornton. She said, I currently work for Child Care Aware of Missouri, and I was interested in this work because of my strong background in customer service and helping others. Our mission is assisting families with childcare needs and resources they need daily. I am passionate about helping others, making a difference daily.
Thank you. That's critical work, especially now. And again, just imagine what hearing that from a board member might look like. And I think my hope is that through kind of normalizing that conversation here, normalizing that conversation, bringing it back even to your internal meetings about people's why, will create greater connection and greater understanding and empathy and trust among your community. And then after we've listened and connected, we want to take those roles, align those roles with strengths and passions. So this is where I find personally that it can be challenging. So it's like, I think people have great intentions and people get really busy, and it can be really hard to get your board to move out of actions that they are used to engaging in. So some ways, so in having those early listening and connecting kinds of conversations, you are priming them to take that to the next level, if you will. So having your board members share through storytelling, that can be done, on their LinkedIn pages, inviting them to share a post and share their why. And then also going through inviting board members to outreach activities. Sometimes it's just one or two board members and having them stand alongside you and hear you talk about the mission and inviting them, Lauren had this great experience last year at one of our such and such, and just sort of having them live the work with you and helping them to feel comfortable doing that. Now, not everybody's going to attend an in-person event necessarily in that context, unless it's like a big fundraiser or something like that. And also do that same kind of thing through social sharing. Regine and I, a month ago when we chatted, I remember talking about just how hard it was even sometimes to get board members to share social posts. And I'm not sure why that is. I think there's a host of reasons, but thumbs up if that is also your experience. So no matter how many times they hear it, you'll have a few that will do it, and then a lot who don't, even though they will like a post or something that you share. So many people are, even given the data as to how meaningful it is, won't share, but sort of giving that why and providing them opportunities throughout the year to tell their story. hey, would you be willing to share that on social media? Hey, would you be willing to share that in this next post we're doing for XYZ? Um, Giving them that personal prompt to take that story that they've already practiced sharing in a meeting or in a one-on-one conversation and asking them to take it to the next step. Does somebody have something?
Just a thumbs up, I think, to agree with
Oh,
the.
okay. I just wanted to make sure. Um, And there's tons of support across nonprofits nationally for this relationship-centered approach. There's a great article that I encourage everybody to connect with. It's the sources at the bottom of this slide that talks about that features a number of executive directors and CEOs of nonprofits throughout the U.S. And they're highlighting what is most meaningful in approach. And here's just a few examples. I'm not going to read them aloud to you. You all can do that, but this just gives you a sense of like, this is a theme across nonprofits where we know that relationship building with our board matters. Okay, so the next is who's in the boardroom with us. These are not labels, they're patterns. But I wanted to sort of group some traits that you may have encountered just for the sake of keeping it easy to talk through some of the challenges. And then we'll talk through a reframe and some antidotes for those traits. Perhaps you have encountered someone who is a gatekeeper. Now, I will say, like, probably all of us have embodied some of these traits over time. So I'm not singling any board member or any person that I've personally experienced out, but the gatekeeper has been on the board a long time. They're deeply invested in how things have always been. Sometimes they're resistant to change. They hold a lot of power due to their long tenure, and they may intentionally be resistant to new ideas. So, given that I currently work with a lot of social workers, we talk a lot about a reframe. So the reframe would be this person or this kind of person cares so deeply about the organization. They care deeply about its stability, its strength, and its legacy, and they're coming from a place of deep care. Okay, so we'll hold that thought. And then there's that overextended supporter, somebody who's really invested in what you're doing, but is limited on time. They might miss meetings, they might miss deadlines, they're slow to respond, or they're very hard to get in touch with. They say yes, but then there's a struggle with follow through. And so we know that this person, if we were to invite a reframe, values that work, but they need some flexible and realistic ways to engage, right? And then there's the member in name only. This is a trait where somebody might have limited engagement, very limited attendance and follow through. They may be there, or it may appear that they're there for adding it to their CV, or being able to share with their social network that they're on a board. They can be hard to activate to do anything beyond sort of, the bare minimum. So this may be an opportunity to clarify and connect, and provide them a meaningful role for them to use that sense of purpose in a way that's going to be meaningful for the mission. And then there's the skeptic, the person who consistently questions ideas, strategies, and approaches. They feel critical and disengaged when there's a discussion about something. They offer you lots of corrections. They're hesitant to support campaigns without more information, and they might be very slow in decision making. So the reframe there would be to provide clarity and accountability and to come across as very confident in decisions. So thumbs up if you've encountered some of these traits. Okay. So when we think about being in relationship, it's not going to necessarily be easy or comfortable for us, but the work is to build some relational strategies so that when we encounter traits like we might see in the gatekeeper, for example, we know to reframe it for ourselves with their good intentions so that we can bridge that internal gap for ourselves and move forward in relationship so that we can better work with each of these traits for folks. So with the gatekeeper, it's important to build trust and honor their experience. You want to invite their perspective early. You want to acknowledge their history and contributions. You want to ask for their insights. Just really creating space for them to feel heard. With the name only member, creating that connection and clarity is going to be key. You want to reconnect them to why we're all here, offer them some really specific things that they can do, and clarify what your expectations and roles for them might be. And then ask for them too, like, what kind of engagement feels realistic for you? And I mean, a lot of times people need that space to even have clarity for themselves, much less clarity for you. And then there's the overextended supporter. You want to offer this kind of person or the way this shows up, some flexible engagement. So that's providing smaller time-bound opportunities to contribute. So like with your GiveSTL posts, hey, this post is coming up tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Can you please share it? Something as small as that. Align tasks with their strengths and availability. So I mentioned that board member who was really quiet when I gave them this certain project. Just having to correspond back and forth via email was a really comfortable place for that person to operate from. And so it brought them sort of out of their hesitancy and into more engagement. And it was super helpful to me. But I think too, not expecting them to be 100% all of the time, and normalizing that shift of engagement, like, okay, so we're going to do this. And then I know you have this coming up, so you can back off a little bit, just having that conversation, we want you here. So if that means you can't participate, except, you're a CPA, so you can't participate during tax season, great. But can we count on you for this? Hey, now we're here, tax season's over. Just having those conversations so that they know that even though they're limited on time, that you value them being part of it and finding ways for them to work within their limited schedule. And then expressing appreciation for any level of involvement. I think, so often we have some key board members who are super engaged and they get so much attention and accolades and praise for that, but finding those small ways that other board members can engage and then really showing up with appreciation so that they continue to show up. And then there's the skeptic, building understanding and partnership. So we want to invite their questions early in the process. So when you're coming up on a campaign, and you have your plan, bring that plan to the meeting. Hey, this is my campaign plan. I'd love to have your feedback. What ideas do you have? What questions do you have? And not necessarily that you incorporate all of that feedback, but that you've given a platform in which people can feel seen and heard, which we know is so important for that trust building and authentic relationship building. And then share the context behind your decisions so that even when you don't move with the decisions that they have or the suggestions that they have offered, that they still feel like you've thought it through, you have provided your intention. And so that balances out some of that skepticism. And always frame them as a thought partner and not as a barrier, both internally for yourself and also in conversation with them. Any questions about those relational strategies, and also any ideas too about other traits that you see, other antidotes to managing some of these challenges in relationship building? I always like to pause in case there's people thinking. All right. So now I'm not going to ask you to speak up, but I do want you to take just a few minutes, if you would, to reflect on a specific board member. What motivates them? What are their strengths and passions of which you're aware? How could they engage beyond financial giving? And what is one small action that you could take to deepen that relationship before GiveSTL? So go ahead and just kind of either think through that, go ahead, write if that feels meaningful for you, um, using some of those challenges, reframes, and antidotes that I shared. I'm going to do it too. So we'll take just like a minute or two. Okay, finish up if you need to finish up. I will go ahead and start sharing mine. I'm thinking of a lovely board member who um, really does well in large settings. They are a great networker, a great connector. They are really comfortable talking in front of people, and a very generous financial supporter. And when it comes to engaging on projects or sharing that work in their networks, there's a barrier. And so I'm thinking about, we have a big event coming up before GiveSTL, and there could be an opportunity to invite that person to present an award and to talk about um, their personal story as part of that presentation and their personal relationship with the person that's receiving the award. That they're sort of given that space for that visibility. They're very comfortable in that setting, but then they're also sharing their why. And people will see that person both as their contribution as a board member, but also as having a deep connection to the board through that storytelling. And there's a platform in which I know that they're comfortable doing so. Um, and then when it comes to GiveSTL, saying, hey, I really appreciated, you presenting that Legacy of Hope Award. That was so powerful. And you shared your story. Would you be willing to do that on, May 6th, as we kick off our GiveSTL campaign on social media? If you send me a blurb, I'll put it in a social media post. And I'd love for you to share it in your network, because I know that if people hear it from you personally and see you posting it, it has an even bigger impact than it coming across coming from our organization. So that's kind of what I just thought about off the top of my head. Anybody willing to share their reflection? Or you can put it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, I'm going to move on just so we're not pausing to honor everybody's time. But Regine, you interrupt and let me know if anybody speaks up in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so integrating this relationship-centered approach into a campaign like GiveSTL. We know, based on what we've talked about today, that early input from the board fosters engagement and ownership and enhances that overall effectiveness of such a campaign. So again, when you've had those one-on-ones, it's easier then for people to speak up in a meeting when you present, here's my plan, my campaign plan for GiveSTL. And they will, and again, even if you don't take all of their input, they will feel seen and heard and more likely to engage with the actual campaign because you've had that one-on-one, because you've included them in the campaign planning, because you've given your why as to the decisions that you're making in terms of the campaign. And then inviting folks through storytelling and personal reflections to share their why and using them, whether they email it to you or if you think that they are reliable to share it on their LinkedIn or on their social networks or in their communities in person as well. And then inviting folks through community connection or outreach. Again, if you do any kind of tabling event or casual gatherings of, totally depending on what kinds of outreach or engagement you do in your network, depends a lot on the kind of nonprofit you are, but any kind of community outreach that you do, inviting a board member or two to come with you as a spokesperson to tell their story, to tell their why, and connect people more to the work. And so that when it comes to GiveSTL, then people are feeling connected, not just to an organization, but they have actual people that they see doing that work. And then there's that amplifying social posts with their own personal context so that their networks are seeing, hey, Rachel is involved with the crisis nursery. I had no idea. That's so interesting. It sounds like they do some really interesting work. When people feel that someone they know is doing, engaged in something that's meaningful to them, they are more likely to pay attention and also more likely to engage in the campaign. Okay, so the closing takeaways are relationships first, and then your engagement will follow. And that curiosity and listening, authentic listening and care matter so much more than, the structure of a board meeting, because if you don't have the relationships, it's very hard to move past sort of what everyone shows up expecting is going to be. And then small shifts. This is incremental process. I think a lot of times people engage with the hope that you'll have this big shift and it's going to work like magic. And I think so much of this kind of work is about small shifts that ultimately over time build trust and create lasting impact. And so if I could leave you with 3 questions to help build connection as you move into GiveSTL campaign season, it's asking, what drew you to our mission? How would you most enjoy contributing this year? And what resonates for you the most right now? Any other questions that you would add to that you might ask along those lines? Well, thank you so much. I'll leave you with this thought. What we create together begins with how we show up for each other. This is art by one of the kiddos in our nursery. I just love it, not just because it's springtime, but because butterflies represent change, and that's what we're all trying to enact. Thank you so much for being in conversation today. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I want to make space before we formally end for any questions. Pop them in the chat or please speak up. Again, I don't come with all the answers, and I know that all of you have wisdom and experience too that I would love to hear. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you for sharing your afternoon with me. All the best with GiveSTL. And then I also want to make this really quick. Does anyone have any questions for Regine about GiveSTL specifically?
I could ask one question to her specifically. The question is, when will our pages be refreshed to indicate the updates that are existing for this year as opposed to still showing last year's information? For example, my matching grant information is all populating with last year's data and not this year's.
I'm not sure. That's a great question. Did you save your work, I'm going to assume, when you input it in?
But when I open up my page, the first thing that you see is the status of the matching grants, and all the data is last year's data. And
I will say, so the information for your pages is not quite public yet. That won't happen until right before early giving, which is April 22nd.
Okay.
So the Gives Day pages are not, so they are still showing for last year because
okay.
like
So
hasn't started yet
all right, so
technically.
when will that happen?
So it should happen around April 20th because early
Okay.
giving is April 22nd.
Okay, because I've put the link out for linking to direct to my site, and then when they open it up, it shows all that old stuff.
Yeah, because it's because Gives Day is not yet
Okay.
like able to even give towards the day just
And
yet.
have the graphics been updated yet?
Yes, they are updated in the Dropbox. You can
Okay, good.
access them via the
Okay.
website.
All right. Last time I looked, that wasn't done yet, but thank you very much. You need that.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for joining. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the conversation. Thank you to Regine and the Community Foundation for welcoming me today.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.